All right, let's jump into another deep dive. You guys send in some seriously fascinating stuff, and this time it's Richard Dawkins' The Selfish Gene. So we're going to be looking at family dynamics.
Family dynamics.
Yeah, but not in the usual way, right?
Yeah.
We're taking the perspective of those tiny but powerful units of inheritance. Genes.
Oh,
Genes. So instead of like individuals struggling for survival, the classic,
right.
we're like zooming in on the genes themselves, battling it out over generations.
Yeah, it can really...
I'm already feeling a little less in control of my own destiny, to be honest.
It really kind of challenges our assumptions about how families work,
Yeah.
Dawkins's core idea is this. Genes act selfishly, and individuals,
Okay.
including us,
Yeah.
we're just vehicles for their propagation, that's it.
Vehicles. Wow. Okay, so where does this selfish gene perspective actually lead us when we try to understand families? Like,
Right.
what are the implications?
One of the most surprising is the idea of parent-offspring conflict.
Oh.
We tend to think of parents as selfless caregivers.
Right, naturally.
But from the genes perspective,
Yeah.
there's this like built-in tension.
Wait, that seems so counterintuitive. I mean, parents and offspring share so much genetic material, right? Like, how can there even be conflict there?
You got to think of it this way.
Okay.
Parents and children, right?
Yeah.
They share 50% of their genes.
Okay.
So to a point, their interests are aligned.
Okay.
But each individual wants to maximize its own genetic legacy. And
Wants to,
yeah, well,
metaphorically speaking?
yeah, metaphorically speaking from the genes point of view, right.
Okay.
But that's where the conflict comes in.
I'm starting to see where this is going. Dawkins uses weaning conflict to illustrate this whole thing, right? Like,
Exactly. That's a classic example.
Yeah.
Mammalian mothers, for instance, they have to wean their offspring at some point.
Right.
To conserve resources
Future offspring.
for future offspring, right.
Exactly. But the child,
Driven by its own selfish genes, wants to continue nursing for as long as possible.
it's like a biological tug of war playing out, like
Yeah,
all across the world.
totally.
And Dawkins, he doesn't shy away from some of the harsher examples either, right? Like that whole thing with the runt piglets.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Sadly, sometimes a mother pig will eat her weakest offspring. And from an evolutionary standpoint,
Yeah.
if a runt has little chance of survival,
Yeah.
it makes more sense for the mother's genes to just invest in the stronger siblings.
Because
They're carrying a lot of the same
No.
genes.
So it's a pretty stark reminder that
It is.
nature.
Nature can be brutal.
Yeah, even within families.
Brutal, even within families. It makes you think about, how this genetic logic plays out in other ways too. Like,
Yeah.
what about the competition between siblings for food and attention?
Oh, absolutely. Sibling rivalry.
That's another great example of this underlying genetic conflict.
Right.
Each sibling is, from the genes perspective, of course, trying to get as many resources as they can.
Maximize their share.
Exactly.
So all those squabbles over toys and who gets the bigger slice of cake.
Yeah.
Are we really just puppets in this genetic drama that's been playing out for millennia? It's a little unsettling.
It's definitely a thought-provoking perspective.
Right.
But, we're talking about unconscious motivations here.
Right.
The evolutionary forces that have shaped our behavior over eons.
Over a really, really long time.
Yeah. Doesn't mean that we're, like, totally controlled by our genes.
Okay.
Right.
That's reassuring because I was starting to feel a little bit like deterministic here.
Yeah.
But if we take this whole idea of selfish genes seriously,
Yeah.
it does raise some pretty interesting questions about how we understand human families, like things like inheritance laws, for example, or how we care for our elders.
Right.
Are these cultural practices also influenced by these, deeper evolutionary pressures?
Fascinating question. And it's one that Dawkins himself actually touches on in his work.
Does he?
Yeah, the idea is that even our complex social structures, right, they might be shaped, at least in part, by this underlying drive to ensure the success of our genes.
It's like those family dinners,
Right.
the ones that sometimes feel like a battleground.
Maybe there's more to it than meets the eye.
Totally. But
let's not get too far ahead of ourselves.
yeah.
We've talked about parent-offspring conflict, but Dawkins also explores a different kind of battle. The battle between the sexes.
Yeah.
Is this where things get even more ruthless? I don't know.
Wow.
I'm a little nervous after those piglets.
Let's see.
All right, battle of the sexes. I have to admit, after those piglets, I'm a little nervous about where this is going.
Understand. But from an evolutionary standpoint, I can see how males and females might have, shall we say,
Yeah.
differing priorities when it comes to reproduction, right? Like,
Precisely. And
weird.
Dawkins argues that
Yeah.
the difference in priorities
Yeah.
stems from this fundamental biological asymmetry.
Yeah.
The difference in investment between sperm and eggs.
Right, right. The classic sperm is cheap argument.
Yeah.
But doesn't that kind of play into some pretty outdated gender stereotypes? Like,
Right.
I hesitate to say that,
Yeah.
men are just programmed to be less committed partners.
It's understandable to be wary of those stereotypes, for sure.
Yeah.
And it's definitely not that simple. It's not about
Right.
good partners or bad partners.
Yeah.
It's about understanding the potential for conflict
Okay.
that arises from these differing biological realities.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and
Remember, different species have evolved different ways to navigate these conflicts.
so different strategies for maximizing their genetic success,
Yeah.
right? Exactly. Yeah.
Depending on the species.
Okay.
Okay. Dawkins talks about two main strategies that females employ.
Yes,
Right.
he does.
Domestic bliss and the he-man.
Yes.
I'm guessing domestic bliss is the one that involves finding a reliable partner.
You got it. In this strategy,
Yeah.
females, often described as coy,
Okay.
they make the males work for their attention.
Okay.
Think about those elaborate courtship rituals you see in nature,
Yeah, yeah.
like the male birds,
Yeah, building nests and
bringing food to the female.
bringing food.
Yeah.
So it's like they're paying a courtship fee to prove that they're going to be good providers, right? Like,
Totally.
and that they'll stick around.
Yeah.
That actually sounds kind of familiar.
Indeed. It's a way for females to assess a male's commitment and willingness to actually invest in offspring.
Okay.
And from the male's perspective, it makes sense to demonstrate those qualities.
Right.
Because it increases their chances of passing on their genes.
It increases their chances. Yeah. Okay, I get that.
Yeah.
But what about the he-man strategy? That's the one that usually involves a lot of,
Yeah.
fighting and showing off and
Right.
sort of like those nature documentaries with
Yeah.
elephant seals battling for dominance.
Exactly. In some species, females aren't looking for help raising offspring.
Okay.
Instead, they're focused on finding a mate with the best possible genes,
Right.
even if it means going it alone with the childcare.
So it's all about securing those top-tier genes, even if the male doesn't stick around to change diapers. But this brings up something that I've always found a little puzzling. It's like all those extravagant displays.
Yes.
Like the peacock's tail.
The peacock's tail.
Yeah, they seem so counterproductive. Wouldn't a giant flashy tail make a male
Right.
more vulnerable to predators? It just seems like,
Yeah. That's where this fascinating idea called the handicap principle comes in.
oh, okay.
This is new.
The idea is that these seemingly disadvantageous traits actually signal genetic quality.
Oh, okay. So
Like the male is saying.
it's like a signal.
Yeah, it's like, I'm so strong and healthy that I can survive even with this ridiculously flamboyant tail.
Okay, I have to admit that's pretty clever if
That-
it works.
Right.
But wouldn't predators also notice that ridiculously flamboyant tail? Like, it seems
Yeah.
like it's a risky strategy.
It is a controversial idea.
Okay.
And there's still debate among scientists about how much it actually explains.
Oh, really?
But even if the handicap principle doesn't explain everything,
Right.
the he-man strategy still highlights a key point.
Okay.
Females in these species, right?
Yeah.
They're making this very specific calculation.
Yeah.
They're weighing the benefits of those good genes against the costs of raising offspring alone. Okay, so whether it's domestic bliss or he-man, it all comes back to those selfish genes driving individuals to maximize their reproductive success.
Yeah.
But I have to ask, where do we humans fit into all of this? Are we really just playing out these pre-programmed scripts in
Yeah.
our relationships? I mean, it is a little unnerving to think that our love lives and family dramas might be influenced by these ancient evolutionary forces.
Right.
Does that mean that we don't have free will
Yeah.
when it comes to choosing our partners or raising our kids?
Well, it's certainly not that deterministic.
Okay.
Humans are complex, right?
Yeah.
Shaped by biology and culture.
Yes.
We have consciousness, we have
Yeah.
self-awareness,
We do.
and the capacity to make choices
Okay.
that defy our genetic predispositions.
That's a relief.
Yeah,
Because I was starting to feel like
sure.
my dating app profile was actually written by
By your genes?
by my selfish genes. But but seriously, if we're not just puppets of our DNA,
Right.
how do we make sense of this whole interplay between nature and nurture?
Well, Dawkins himself acknowledges that.
Okay.
While understanding these evolutionary pressures can shed light on our behavior,
Yeah.
it doesn't dictate our every move.
So we're not simply slaves to our
Exactly.
selfish genes.
Yeah.
We have the power to make conscious
But yeah,
choices.
we have the power to make conscious choices. That's right.
Okay, good, good, good. And that brings us to a point that Dawkins emphasizes toward the end of the selfish gene.
Yes.
It's a point that I think is really crucial for understanding how we can move forward as a society.
It is, yeah. Like what is it?
He argues that if we want more altruism and cooperation in the world,
Okay.
we can't rely on it being natural. We have to teach it.
Wow. So he's suggesting that even though we're products of this long evolutionary history.
Right. A history that's shaped in part by those selfish genes.
Yes.
We also have this ability
That transcends.
to transcend our biology and
Yeah.
create a more cooperative world.
Precisely.
Yeah.
We can choose to build a society that values things like empathy and fairness and compassion,
Yeah.
even if those qualities don't always align perfectly with maximizing individual genetic success.
So it's not a question of nature versus nurture, but rather how we can use our understanding of nature to nurture
Yes.
a better future.
Exactly. We are both products of our evolutionary past
Yeah.
and architects of our own destiny.
That's an incredibly hopeful note to end on, you know?
I think so.
It reminds me that we're not simply at the mercy of our genes.
Right.
We have the power to make choices that shape not only our own lives,
Right.
but the future of our species.
And perhaps that ability to choose,
Yeah.
to consciously strive for something better.
Yeah.
That's the most human thing of all.
Well, on that uplifting note,
Yeah.
it's time to wrap up this deep dive.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground today, from the ruthlessness of natural selection
Oh, we did.
to the complex dance between genes and culture.
It has been a fascinating exploration of the
Yeah.
often hidden forces that shape our lives.
Absolutely. And a reminder that even though we might be,
Gene machines.
gene machines in some sense,
In some sense.
we're also capable of writing our own stories.
Yes, we are.
Thanks for joining us.